What's up, guys? It's director Andrew Hara. I just wanted to jump on real quick before the start of the show to let you know that after it, we're going to put the campaign video for Indiegogo. We're making a slasher film. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's called Followed. It's about a streamer who's being stalked. It's very creative. We're really excited to make it, but we need your help. So please check out the Indiegogo campaign at the end of this and then follow the link. It's going to be in the pinned comment and in the description. We really would love your help. Thank you so much. And yeah, now let's start the show. Happy December, guys. Welcome back to the podcast. I don't remember if we've done a episode in December or not, but you can tell us. But anyway, today we're covering a Christmas classic. Oh, before I continue, please like, subscribe, give to our Indiegogo, all of that nonsense. At the end of this, you'll see a commercial for Indiegogo. I think it's coming to an end. I think this next one might be the last one for you guys. So yeah, if you have any last reservations about wanting to donate, do that now. It's a slasher film. It's a cool movie. That's all I got. That's all I got, guys. I've been promoting this for 3 months. I'm done. But I'm excited. I'm pretty sure it's going to go, so that'll be cool. Look out for that in 2 years or something. I don't know. It takes a while. But
yeah, it'll be done next week.
Yeah, it'll be done. Yeah. Now on to the good stuff. We're covering a Christmas classic. 2016, Gods of Egypt.
Okay, I was like, did I watch the wrong movie?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is the classic.
I assume that this is what Egypt looks like in December.
Yeah, definitely.
Directed by Alex Proyas, who also directed The Crow. Written by Matt Shazrama and Burke Sharpless. I don't know. It seems like a fake name, so you didn't put your name on this, Burke.
I wonder why. Take your name off of this movie.
It stars Brenton Thwaites. Okay, that one wasn't on me. That's a hard name. It's like Thwaites.
Yeah, no, thank you.
He
No, that's rude. Yeah.
It stars late great Chadwick Boseman in one of his other roles. It wasn't Black Panther. It stars Gerard Butler. I'm just skipping around one specific name. We'll get to it. It's not going to be pronounced correctly.
You can call him by his most famous character if you'd like.
It stars
Jamie Lannister.
It stars Courtney Eaton and Elida Young. And then, of course, the main star is Nikolaj Coster-Waldau.
Hell yes.
You know him? That's our favorite actor.
That's close.
Sister
that's
love.
Close enough.
He's our favorite Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm. Kingslayer, box office player.
Yeah, the box office. He King slays in this one too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do want. What, Josh? Why don't you sum this up in about one sentence and no longer?
Please. You have 8 words.
Yeah.
There are gods of Egypt, and they fight each other.
Yeah. I do. I do want to just say, this movie is so ridiculous. Let me just tell you what the plot is. So, the god Horus is about to be crowned, but then the god Set comes down and rips out his eyes, and then, separate from that, a year later, a peasant boy is he wants to make good things for his girlfriend or wife, and so she works for someone, and so he steals from that guy that she works for. Hey, that's not good. That's not good, fake Aladdin. And then she gets killed, so then he has to try to save her from going to the underworld, and they have a couple of days before you get to heaven or hell. And then so he enlists the help of the god Horus to try to stop him, and then along the way they're like, we should also kill Set because he's a bad guy, and they're like, yeah, sure. And then that is the plot. And I do want to I want to be clear, it's based on the mythological story, the contendings of Horus and Set, in the way that there are characters named Horus and Set in this movie,
yes.
And in no other way whatsoever.
Right.
It is very much like a Disneyland theme park ride of a film where you're that's kind of Egypt shaped. Okay.
Right. And it's the video they played before the ride is like just elongated.
I do want to say something, guys. I love this movie.
I like it quite a bit, actually. On rewatch, I was like, this is a romp.
And let's get the elephant out of the room right away. If this movie had even one person who looked even a little bit Egyptian, I could have given this movie 1,000 out of 10 stars. But instead, they do something which does make it way, way funnier, but which makes it also a little bit more racist too, is that instead of hiring any even people from Africa, they decided to hire any British person they could find.
Yeah.
And they said, hey, I know you're an actor and you could probably do an accent, but we want you to do your native accent as thick as humanly possible so that we can barely understand you and so everyone knows there's no way you could be from Egypt.
Right.
Gerard Butler, be as Irish as you possibly can be so that you're playing the god Set, so that every time you say the word Egypt, it doesn't sound correct.
Right. You're home.
That's the movie we're dealing with here.
I was shocked at like how it's like. I thought this was the movie by Ridley Scott. The one with Christian.
Yeah, tell us about that journey of thinking that it was going to be a real movie and then this movie.
Oh yeah, you never seen it before?
No,
yeah.
No. I didn't know if this was like a Tarsem Sting movie, that Immortals, or if this was a Ridley Scott movie, but I was ready for both of them. And so when it first started, I was like, okay, maybe we have a visual master here at play. Like, I'll see.
You were not ready for Egypt Muppet Babies.
As soon as they get to like, it was like they show like those statues in the opening credits, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then they fly across Egypt, and I was like, oh, what the fuck is this? And it was like directed by Alex Proyas, and I was like, oh. So I was just like watching the movie, like, what the fuck even is this?
Oh man,
and it's crazy. It's also crazy because I don't know how much of this. Like, Alex Proyas made The Crow, he made Dark City. His movie's literally named Dark City. And if you watch this movie, you'd be like, hey, have you ever heard of Not Having a Light?
Yeah.
But, like, it's so weird because some of the lighting, like, this movie is lit like a TV show.
Yeah.
But on one hand, it doesn't look super great. But on the other hand, it does kind of look like what they were doing with the Ten Commandments or with Cleopatra, like those old-fashioned, like epic films.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that was intentional or they just didn't know how to shoot.
That's in my notes.
Screen.
Yeah, because it very much feels like a 1950s Hollywood, right down to like only starring white people in like super ethnic roles. But like, I was like, did he just accidentally like hit this vibe? Or is this like a commentary?
I'm pretty sure. I think that he like meant to like make it look like they were like CGI sets. Like they didn't make it seem like an immersive world. It made it feel like it was like he CGI'd a 1950s movie with like extra pyramids in the background. And it's just like, what am I supposed to feel from this?
Yeah, and let me be clear. Like this is essentially like how we see movies about Moses and about. Like I'm trying to think of other religions that have like these big kind of religious epics. 10 Commandments is the biggest one. But so this is kind of emulating that where the assumption is that all of the ancient Egyptian legends are true. And so like you're really dealing with the god of war. And also all of the gods are like 12 feet tall as compared to the humans. And
they're just also a little taller.
They bleed gold blood.
Yeah.
And you don't really realize that until like every once in a while you'll be like, wait, what's going on? Why did they cut him and now he's all shiny?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, they bleed gold. But this movie, it just assumes that you're gonna know that. It's not like, oh yeah, it's by the way. It's just like
it mentions it in one sentence at the very beginning, and I was like, that's weird. And then I forgot about it till the end when like there's blood everywhere and it's all gold.
Well, and speaking of the beginning, so it starts off and like, and then we see the main character whose name is like Keck. It's Beck. His name is Beck, and he's with his wife Zaya.
Yeah.
And he like just stole a dress for her to go to this coronation because they're gonna elect or crown the new king of Egypt gods, and so they're like, let's all go to this coronation or whatever. And then the girl's like, and then he's like, I brought you a gift. I'm a thief, but I have a heart of gold.
Yeah, there's nothing bad about me besides my thievery.
And also, I will say that it's funny because at least with the women, there's more diversity, and with the women, they are all super attractive. It was like distracting how attractive women were in this movie. But what makes it even funnier is that so then the girl's like, "Thank you for this dress. Let me go change," and she goes behind like a silk sheet, and she takes off her shirt, and I don't know if it was CGI or what, but she has a Jessica Rabbit body that does not fit on her body. Like,
right. Yeah.
Like it's literally like ridiculous. And I was like, okay, this is the movie that's happening.
Yeah, this is what
and
we're doing.
So then they go to the coronation, and Brian Brown is the king of Egypt. Brian Brown from such Egyptian films as Cocktail and FX.
You do have to, like, as we're describing this, if you haven't seen the movie, cue, because, like, you know, Brendan Thwaites is kind of the second main. He's like the thief.
Yeah.
He is never not with a very thick Australian. He's like, "Oi, enjoy this dress," and you're like, oh, "Okay, man, I guess
you do you."
Oi, is that Ra the sun god?
Yeah, the whole thing. Although he it's weird because in Oculus he doesn't have an accent. I was like, I know you could just do a neutral tone,
and that's what's weird is that.
Yeah, like, he's the brother in Oculus.
We've seen Gerard Butler use an American accent. Like, it's not great, but it's kind of that Liam Neeson. It just becomes like it doesn't really, not specific from anywhere.
Yeah.
And then Horace, like, a lot of these people have used accents before. So I do think it was intentional, and maybe it was because they knew that they were going to get pushback. So they're like, let's just go all the way
own
and have
it,
them
like,
just speak how they are.
Yeah. I think that if they do accents, that would have been crazy. That would have been.
Yeah, I think it would have been worse.
Yeah, that'd have been like.
Well, we'll find out when we do watch the Christian Bale one.
Yeah,
they did
that
it.
One?
I don't know. We'll find out.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen that one.
Okay.
It was too much. But yes, so then they go to coronation, and then the Osiris is like, "I'm gonna crown Horus, but he's not worthy, but I'm gonna do it anyway." And then Gerard Butler comes in. He's playing Set, and let me just tell you guys, Gerard Butler is having more fun than anyone has ever had in the history of acting, because he's like strutting around.
Yeah.
I don't even know if he has real characterization. He's like, I'm here to take the crown.
What's
and
up?
then, like, his dad, Osiris, is like, hey, this isn't time for you. You were not too good of a son, so I'm giving it to this other son.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, I'm going to fight you. And he's like, I'm not going to fight you. And then he's like, okay. And he stabs him in the chest. And then he cuts off his head. Oh, no, he cuts off his head later. But it's just such a weird, like, and then Horus and Set they start fighting because they're like, oh, you can't kill my dad. And then you're like, okay, this movie's crazy. There's giants. There's normal people. The gods are all bleeding blood. And it's only been 5 minutes into this movie.
Right.
There's no way there's going to be a huge CGI Transformers scene right after this.
Yeah, we're still trying to
and that's when that's when Set and Horus turn into Animorph style gold.
They are like Power Rangers villain costume robots. It is, but here's here's the thing. I will say, when they are fighting each other as like just regular men or gods, I guess, and it's just the two actors, I'm like, this actually looks pretty good in that like classical fight way.
Yeah.
When they transform into CGI battle bots, you're like, all right. I'm done.
Yeah,
it crosses into epic style levels of how high am I this high, or is this the movie?
I know.
And those are the best kind of movies. And now, like, it's so funny because it'd be like, you watch Jurassic Park. Not to compare this movie to Jurassic Park, it's a little unfair, but that first scene with Muldoon where they're on the island, everything is so like you don't even really see the raptor. You see his eye. Mm-hmm. You see him kind of move real fast. You see the cage move.
Mm-hmm.
If Alex Proyas had directed Jurassic Park, it would have been the T-Rex and the Velociraptor just fighting each other in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Before we've even understood what the park is.
Right. Because they're also.
And so yes. So then, like, they get into the CGI fight, and then Set wins, and he's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm gonna take off your eyeballs." And so he rips out his eyes that have magic powers, and then he's like, "I'm gonna kill you," but then Elida Young, who's also just insanely gorgeous. And she had talked about, she plays Hathor, and she had talked about how she was going to marry Horus, and she's a god of love, and they're in love. And then so she's like, wait, don't kill him. I'll marry you. And Set's like, I am married already, but sure.
Yeah.
And so he's like, all right, let's go, guys. And then they're like, oh, a year later.
Yeah, it just hard cuts to.
And not only do
later.
they do a year later, but like nothing has really changed for Set. Like he kind of took a year to, I guess, get ready to do stuff. Because he has a plan, and it for some reason doesn't start until the movie's like story starts. But he has a plan that he's eventually going to do. Also, let me be very clear. Beck has maybe had one scene in the movie so far.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 30 minutes, and he is the main character of this film.
Right.
And also, it's been 30 minutes, and the journey that they're going to go on and the story has not begun yet. So now the story has finally started.
Yeah.
And so that's when Beck steals something, or he steals an eye, and then he steals Horus's eye.
Why does he do that?
And then they're like trying to escape.
He goes into a deep dark tunnel. And why is he going into that deep dark tunnel? I forget.
For his boss, doesn't his boss say like it's literally Aladdin? His boss is like, hey, if you steal this for me, you'll be able to buy something for your girlfriend or buy her freedom.
Right.
Yeah, it's he wants to buy her freedom. She works in the architect's office, or I guess she's a slave in the architect's office, and then so she has access to the plans. So he is like, oh, I'm going to get around the traps using the plans. Steal the eye, win her freedom, but of course the architect's like, I know you're stealing from me. I mean, it's super obvious.
Yeah.
And then also there's a very hilarious scene where he like starts breaking in, and then he falls on a bunch of skulls, and then the skulls are like taking him to like a big like a melting thing like in Toy Story 3.
Yeah.
And then he sees like a little platform, and he jumps on that platform, and that platform is just a hallway to nothing. Like it goes to the fire pits. So I guess it's like if you ever want to see down the fire pit, you can walk down this corridor and just look. And it's that thing where like right now we're making a slasher film that you can donate to. And one of the things is like there's a scene where we have to establish like a certain kind of security like alarm that this person has. And it's like, well, why would she have it? Like, you know, we have to explain all that stuff. Gods of Egypt is like, hey, let's put a hallway here. It's like, where does it lead? And they're like, hey, we've already moved.
Yeah, it leads to safety. It leads to the next scene.
Yeah. It leads to the next part. And so he gets it, and then he's like running away, and then he kisses her. And he does a cool scene where he holds up the eye, and it blinds everyone. I don't know how he knew that could happen, but he does. Yeah. And so then they're running away, and they're just like looking behind them. Open fields, like with their hands out like this, and then the boss is like, I have a bow and arrow, and he shoots the girl, and she dies. And then they're like, oh, well, she died a slave, so she doesn't get to go to heaven, because here it's still the old ancient Egyptian way where you have to buy your way into heaven, which in case anyone didn't know, you know, that was the point of the pyramids, is that in Egyptian culture you had to, your worth like provided your status in heaven. So that's why Egyptian pyramids are filled with treasures, because it was what they were going to give to the gods, to Anubis, to get into the underworld. So because she is born, or she died a slave, she has no property, so she would go straight to the underworld hell. And like, again, that's one of my favorite things about this movie, is that it does like, it's completely a new story that doesn't have anything to do with Egyptian culture.
Yeah.
But they do play with Egyptian like stuff. Like it'd be like if they made it'd be like if they made a movie about Christianity, and like God was turning water into wine, but also he was like fighting the Yakuza. Right. That's what this movie feels like. Like he was still walking on water. It's just like
a secondary. It's like, by the way, this is still true, but
it's a little
this
wild.
feels like
doing this.
This feels like a 2-hour taken seriously Family Guy sketch where they're like, this is like the time that Set killed Horus.
Right. And it's just like
it just cuts to these guys.
Like the visuals like just looks like Megalopolis and Rand book covers again. Like that we were talking about the other day.
Yeah.
Like it's just like such a weird like visual motif
It's
the whole
that
time.
that
Like, just looks crazy.
it's so not Egyptian,
Yeah.
by the way. Like that's the one
Yeah.
thing where you're like, this doesn't look like anything.
It looks more Wakanda than
Yeah,
Egyptian
yeah.
in that like it looks futuristic but also ancient. So then he's like, okay, I gotta go save my wife. So let me go to Horus because that was her god that she prayed to. Um, and then so they're like, okay, here you go. And so he goes to visit Horus, and he's like, get out of here. I don't like people anymore. And he's like, oh, I have one of your eyes. So they make a bargain, and the bargain is that if he can, they have a couple of days to save the girl, and if he can get his other eye, he can do it and stop Set. But they have to go on an epic adventure. And then also at this exact time, Set is like, oh, I have a plan, but I can't tell you what the plan is, but it involves me taking over everything. And then there's another character who hasn't been introduced, who's Ra, the sun god, which we'll get to him. And he has a third plan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of not really related to anyone else, but it does involve some of the characters. And then
I remember all this.
I can remember all this because I watched it with love in my eyes. And so then they're off on an adventure, and the first thing they do is they go find the girl, and then they're walking, and then they find, oh, by the way, so in this movie, not only can the gods turn into transformers that are made of gold, but even like the lesser degree mythology monsters, the Titans,
demigods,
as they're referred to, like the Minotaur and the other Minotaur, and then there's a third Minotaur. They didn't look up other demigods.
Right.
They're a lot of bull men.
Like, they did the Sphinx and they did the big snake. They're not going for a third creature. But they can also transform for really no reason. So then they fight one of them, and they're like
fun.
They fall down a waterfall. Oh, wait, do they go see Ra before
they meet the girl? They see Ra before they meet the girl. And this actually probably is one of the the best scenes, because it's like the most like,
so when we meet
epic heavy metal like album cover
part. This part actually
Ra is Ra is the biggest Egyptian god. I think everyone knows who Ra is. He's the sun god. And so you're saying, like, of course they're gonna get someone. And I'm gonna keep doing this joke because it's hilarious. So who do they get? They get Irish actor, Australian actor Jeffrey Rush to play the sun god Ra. But it's kind of cool because then you see that the Earth is flat, like how
that was so confusing.
And it goes like this, like in a turn, and then the sun. So Ra drags the sun with him, and
it's
then
on a chain.
There's a big knight who wants to eat the sun. And so Ra has to fight him every night, but that's how we get night. And it's like, that's what I'm talking about. Again, I had to rewind it because, like William, I was like, what the hell is happening right now? The first time I saw it.
Yeah, it's like,
because they do not explain. You're just supposed to have remembered the Ra mythology that none of us have studied.
I think it's one of those movies where if you stop trying to piece together what's happening, you're just like, this looks really cool. Although I think Jeffrey Rush is, he does a good job, but when he turns his head, you see they gave him like a mohawk ponytail that you can only see from the back, and you're like, oof, just should have had him bald. I don't know why you chose that.
And they gave him sunburns on his face.
Oh, yeah, right.
They know what they're doing.
He's the sun. Although, it's funny too, and I was like, don't do this, because like we said, all the gods are. It's kind of the Lord of the Rings, like Hobbit to human ratio, where they do a lot of like aspect ratio filming. But for some reason, Ra is not just the size of a god, but whenever he goes into like pulling the sunship mode, he like gets even bigger. Like, he doesn't transform, he just gets taller, so that he's like 2 times the size of the other gods, and you're like, why though? Just make him a normal size. Like, why are you having him like juice up like this?
The size of the gods was like insane. Like, they're barely bigger than the regular people. They're like 2 feet bigger. So
it's also not very consistent.
It's like, it just looks weird. Like, make them huge, or like just don't fuck with them. It's so weird.
Sometimes every once in a while they're really, really big, But for the most part, like they're still on the same frame, and it's like, wait, are you guys 12 feet tall? Or are you 7 feet tall? Or are
Yeah,
you 8 feet
sometimes they're
tall?
just on an apple
Yeah.
box, and then other times they're literally like 12
There's
foot
so like there's
giants.
a scene at the beginning where Horace falls into a bath, and the person is like this big as she walks to him, and then every other scene, like the guy comes up to like here.
Yeah.
And so it's like, wait, is that guy really tall, or
Right.
were those people really short? What the hell's happening?
But like, I do get, because in hieroglyphics they would do the most important person as the biggest. Like the emperor would always be like the biggest human, and then the gods would be slightly. And I was like, okay, they're like, oh, the hieroglyphics were real. People really were this big. But then like you muddle it even further, where when you like god power up, you like get bigger. I'm just like, don't.
Yeah.
You've overthought this, and it's a mess.
It's like someone had the idea that they would be bigger, like the hieroglyphics. Then someone had the idea that they should look like the pictures, you know, like with the head, the coyote heads and stuff. And then someone was like, well, let's just do it together. And they're like, okay, I guess we have an unlimited budget.
So it's like, do we have the CGI budget for this? The answer is no. Would you see it?
The answer is somewhat.
We're going to make something.
So then Ra's like, hey, you're gonna go on a journey. It's gonna teach you lessons. I know all of this, and then I'm gonna be surprised later somehow. And so like Horace is like, okay, I guess I'll go on the journey. And then, I do like that every time they refer to the human, they're like, who's that stupid human that keeps tagging along?
Yeah.
Or mortal. They keep calling him mortal.
They also keep being like, oh, by the way, your deal with this human's fake, right? You're gonna screw him over. And Horace is like, yeah, of course. I don't care.
I do like that there's very like, you don't see too often where the gods do not give a shit about the humans. And it's not like seen as either a bad or good thing. It's just seen as a thing. And this movie is like one of the ones that does it. I understand why you wouldn't do it, because it makes the stakes go way down. But Gods of Egypt isn't worried about stakes, guys, okay? They don't even eat steaks. They don't have cows.
And mortals.
They have minotaurs. Yeah. So then they go to Earth, and then that's when they fight the Minotaur, and then the Minotaur's like, oh, he tells Set, he's like, oh, he beat us up because he has Horus as his helper. And then Set's like, okay, time to do this plan that didn't involve Horus or anyone else at all, but I guess I'm going to do it.
It's like,
and his plan is to like get a bunch of different gods' powers so that he can take on Ra to become leader. And again, Ra has another secret plan, but we haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
So then they're like, let's go on this journey. Then they meet the girl, and then they meet who are the snake ladies?
They're just other lieutenants.
There's like two girls, and like
they both ride snakes. That's all you need to know.
We'll talk about this at the end of the year.
Oh yeah, I don't know who they were either. Yeah,
the writers. Yeah, we'll talk about this when we talk about at the end of the year, Venom. But they're riding snakes, and in Venom, there's like a snake character, and I'm like, hey, I'm kind of glad they didn't make him talk in that generic like where they emphasize every S. So they're like, we're going, well, catch his. This movie, they're gonna do it. Like, you knew they were gonna do it. I knew they were gonna do it.
You know what? This is a good scene because it's them fighting two snakes.
Yeah. And also, you're like, okay, they do have an African American playing one of the sisters, and they're twins. So are they going to get another African American to at least have two? And the answer is no. They can't. Abby Lee from Australia. This is a very Australian.
Was it like filmed there for tax credits or something?
I think it was filmed in ancient Egypt.
Duh.
Oh, I forgot that was
from the locations. Yeah.
Although the CGI looks really bad when they battle bot out, but these big monster snakes actually look quite good.
There's a surprising amount of CGI that does look good, considering A, how much of it looks bad, and B, that their budget was not crazy insane. It was like 140 million, which is like, that's what Marvel uses to make one frame of
right,
exactly.
So
right.
It wasn't a huge budget, and they are some impressive stuff. He understands that like we want to see the big snake look cool, not so much the background. So then they fight him, and then like that's why they meet the girl, and which doesn't really make sense. Oh, I guess it's like a Cupid thing. She's the god of love, so she's very persuasive. So she like tells one of the snakes like, "You're on fire." and then the snake like turns itself on fire and kills it. And so like that's pretty cool, but like yeah, it's a very cool scene that like what are they trying to get in that scene?
I think
are
they
just
like
trying
traveling.
To go meet?
Yeah,
I just think
they're on their way to see
the snakes just
Chadwick
intercept
Boseman.
them at this battle
but their
arena.
battle strategy is so confusing. Like they're just like, we're going to use the human as bait, and then he's going to run somewhere, and then somehow Jamie Lannister is going to be like right underneath the snake and like
stab.
It just seems like such a terrible plan. Like it was just so illogical.
Yeah,
and I don't know what they were up to the whole
like,
time. Which I think that's kind of like what this movie suffers from. Is you just have no idea what's happening at all ever.
And I do think that is a problem with how many different, like, you know, you think of Indiana Jones, and you have that evil archaeologist guy, and then you have the Nazis. But at the end of the day, they're all trying to get the Ark. And so they're all going to culminate in that Ark. They all have different motivations, but they're all trying to get the same thing, even Indiana Jones. Yeah, it's just one goal. But in this one, every single character has a different goal, and they don't always meet. Like the girl, if they just decide to go save the girl, I mean, they need his eye, but like they don't need to stop Set to save the girl, and they don't need the girl to stop Set. So like they could do either of those things without, and like Set doesn't need them to save the girl or to stop him to do his plan, and that's why it's confusing that he hasn't been doing his plan so much, you know. And so he takes his wife's her wings.
Yeah.
And so then they're going to meet Chadwick Boseman, who is the god of wisdom. And kind of the joke here is that he knows a lot of information, but he's not actually very smart.
He is very pretentious, but
he's played by BreadTube.
What?
That was a joke no one will get. But if you go back 4 years when ContraPoints was popular, you'll get that joke. I was gonna say Twitter, but I feel like I shit on Twitter too much.
I do like his his whole like, oh, I'm a genius, but he's kind of foolish, you know.
Yeah,
like everyone's a stereotype, but I think
he's just a good actor.
Well.
And I do like again, Chadwick Boseman is also having a great time, but he's doing it in a way that enhances the performance in a not hilarious way, where Gerard Butler is doing it in a way that does enhance the performance, but not very hilarious.
The hallucinatory way.
Like Chadwick Boseman, and that's the thing that sucks, is that Chadwick Boseman could have played any of the more main characters. Like here he's a supporting role, and I understand this was filmed before Black Panther, but he's just like, he understands the assignment a lot more than a lot of the other characters. And I think like that's all you really needed to make this movie, so we didn't have to do a disclaimer at the top. His two actually just have. And and that's what makes it so frustrating. It's like, okay, but Chadwick Boseman shows that this could have been fun. I mean, I don't know if it would have saved this movie. I think a lot of people would have dismissed it because it's so silly. But at least it would have been like, we wouldn't have to talk about race in a hilarious way.
Truly.
But But so he's like, oh, well, I'll go help, because they have to go see the Sphinx. This movie has everything. They have to go see the Sphinx so they can get something else from the Sphinx. It doesn't matter what they're getting.
I don't even remember like what their like post Sphinx goal is. Yeah, essentially they're like, you're the smartest god. We want you to like come solve the Sphinx's riddle. And he's like, oh, well, does one of you fail it and then die and then come back and tell me and I'll tell you the answer? And they're like, and then they basically are like, oh, so you're like too like afraid? He's like, I'm not afraid, I'll go with you. Like immediately. It's just very like, all right, let's just get this seed, you know.
Yeah, we knew they were gonna get there.
Let's get it going.
So then they go to the Sphinx, who looks cool and is made of sand.
Very Australian accent on this Sphinx, by the way. I don't know who plays it.
The Sphinx is like, good day, mate. I have a riddle for you. Faster Sphinx, Australian for faster.
But even the CGI monsters can't escape the Australian accent. I love it.
And then of course the Sphinx is like, hey, here's the riddle. I don't remember what the riddle is. I know it's tomorrow is the answer, but Ra can't understand it because he's a stupid god and not a mortal.
He can't think like a mortal, right?
Yeah. And so then the guy gets it because he, in addition to everything else, he's somehow also Mary Sue, and he always has the answer to everything. And And so he solves it, and then honestly, I don't know what happens to the Sphinx. He just goes away, and I don't know what they
Yeah, I
get.
think he turns
But
melts.
then Set gets there.
Yeah, minutes later, I don't even know what was behind the Sphinx because minutes later, it's a
Yeah.
new movie where Gerard Butler shows up to be like, "All right, time for a climactic fight, idiots."
Oh, that's where they're trying to get Set's power, and that's where he comes because he has the water. And then they're like, "Oh, here," and then Set comes, and he's like, "I'm gonna take your brain, yoink." And then he's also like, "Oh," and then they get away, but he does kill Chadwick Boseman, at least for now. Oh, and then that's when Beck also gets hurt. Oh, Beck sacrifices himself, and he has to go to hell or heaven. But then the girl, this is all in 10 seconds. Then the girl is like, "Hey, I'll sacrifice myself or Beck. You always want me to go to the underworld. I'm gonna take my bracelet that keeps me from the underworld." And then the guy's like, "No, don't do it." And she's like, "I have to. And also, we're gods. We can come out of the underworld whenever." And Beck can't, so maybe I should go. And then so she goes down there, and then they're like, "Okay." Then we cut to a completely different part, and now this is where we get to the third plan. So then Set gets to Raw, and he's like, "Hey, Raw, I'm gonna take over." And then Raw's like, "Oh, that's the plan. You're gonna become me. You're gonna be the new me, so you'll have the most power in the world." And then Set's like, "Oh yeah, if I did have the most power, I would have to become you. That's like the most obvious thing.
He doesn't want to
I
fight
don't
that
wanna do
monster
that."
every night.
And then,
Which,
yeah, I don't want to fight this monster.
Yeah.
I don't know
that
what I
monster,
want.
He's like, "I don't want to
because
fight
it
this
has-
monster every night. It's so grueling and hard." But every time Jeffrey Rush fights that monster, he just like this thing comes out of space and he points his stick at it twice.
He just zaps
and then
it.
Like, "Oh no,
Yeah.
I could do that job, man."
But I think you're like stuck on like you can't.
Yeah.
They do and this is because I believe this movie's PG-13, but to kind of like show first Taurus's decadence at the beginning and then later like Set's decadence, it's like, oh, there's a lot of like fully clothed people around you to show you just had sex, but not where you could see any nudity, and you're kind of drunk looking. So I think the idea is Set wants to keep living it up versus being chained to a ship.
But I'm saying all you have to do is just go get chained up for like 1 minute every night. That's all you have to do.
Yeah.
You probably have to like sleep up there.
Transport.
You have to like live up
I mean,
there.
where is he sleeping right now? He's not sleeping anywhere.
I don't know.
Yeah.
In a different part of the theme park.
I think that's the weird thing is that even though they're all like, "Oh, I don't want to do this," they're not really ever doing anything. Like they're just kind of hanging out all the time. And every once in a while, like someone has work, but then the work is always easy. Like that girl who's the love girl, she just has to exist, and loves exist. It's like the Santa Claus. So like, why are you complaining about work?
Y'all got it.
This movie has the same logic as the Santa Claus, is what I'm trying to say.
It's not dissimilar.
And so then he's like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." So then he's like, "Yoink, stab again." And then they're like, and then he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna let the Olympus or whatever we live, our heaven, and also the afterlife and the real world are all gonna get destroyed by this monster, and then somehow I'm gonna get more power. I don't know.
Come out on top, yeah.
Yeah, and so then they're like, "Well, we got to stop them," and then the gates to the afterlife close, so the girl gets a little bit more of the ticking time bomb, and so then they have to fight, and then it's just
it was just a bunch of crap.
There's a very long CGI.
It's such a long scene. I will say, I was on board until that last huge CGI fest. I do get pretty bored during that.
That's about 20 minutes that you could
so
skip.
long, and it's so CGI.
Although you know what I enjoy. I don't remember. Like I know, like essentially, Beck and Horace resolve their differences. So like, you lied to me. Yeah, it's like but we're gonna stop Set now for real. Throughout the whole movie, Set Gerard Butler has been your classic like, "Oh, I'm evil," like type villain.
Yeah.
Like whenever like the bull like fails him and stuff like that, he'll be like, "Oh, you did your best." So then he cuts him down. You know, it's like like he doesn't tolerate. At the very beginning of the movie, he's like lording over this human architect. He's like, "Oh, you said your like temple traps were impregnable, like that no one could get past them. But now a mortal got past them." And the guy's like, "You think he's gonna kill him?" And he's like, "Do better next time." And he walks away. And I was like, oh, this architect must be part of his plan later to like somehow the architect will be involved. No, the only reason he doesn't kill the architect is at the end, while like the CGI fest is happening, Beck has a human
Oh,
to
hell yeah.
fight because he like fights the architect on like a
Of course.
platform, and I was like, well, he's an old man. This
Yeah.
isn't very threatening.
Yeah.
He's just like
It was very I like that every Gladiator movie always has an old man that the young
Right.
character has to fight.
and like because he killed his girlfriend, so like okay, he's finally like getting revenge, but it's also like I mean this doesn't seem very challenging. He's like 60 years old in Egypt.
And not only that, but at no point have they ever done that thing where they like showed him fighting so that they're like, oh, he might be old, but he's equipped. Like the whole time he's been presented as like a rich, like fuddy duddy. So it's not like you're like, oh shit, I can't wait for this fight to happen, you know?
Yeah, just like, oh, Beck needs something to do, like in the background. So that's what he does. He kills an old man.
And then of course they win, and then Horus is like, now I'm the new king, and also from now on to get into heaven, you just have to do good stuff. And I was like, man, we really bungled that one. So then he's like, there you go. And I do like that idea of like, oh, this is the story of how Egyptians kind of got less materialistic. I don't know how much of that is true, but yes, that ends up being the big story. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes you want a crate, like you think of, I remember the showrunners of Game of Thrones were talking about that show. And they said the reason that you don't see dragons until the very last, like the dragon eggs until the very last episode, is because they were trying to ease you into the world of Game of Thrones and the mythology. Like seeing a bigger than normal wolf is one thing, seeing an entire dragon is another thing. So you kind of have to get the audience ready for it. But so every once in a while, you want to just jump in and have a 20-minute sequence of gold-plated gods fighting each other. Like this movie went for it, and I have to give them a little bit of props for how insane they.
I do think like it's very it's kind of like a Clash of the Titans. You know, it's like a buddy comedy journey, and I think that part actually does work quite well. It really is just that very final 20, because the movie is like I think it's like a little over 2 hours, like 2 hours, like 5 minutes or something. And you're kind of like with it until that last like 20-minute fight scene where you're like, all right, guys, you went too far. But up until then, I think it's pretty well paced and kind of like it structurally is fun.
It loses some pacing in the second half. Like that first half is pretty fast and pretty exciting, almost too fast.
Yeah.
And like once they really like settle into things, then you're just kind of, and it's also because they add like 8 different plans, and you're like, okay. And you know by the end of it, it's going to come down to like Horus and Set fighting each other. So you're like, we don't need this many plans. Like maybe he was already king, and then he finds out that Horus is doing this. He's like, I got to go stop him because he'll take my power.
Yeah, they didn't need all the twists, but the rhythm of like, oh, they find someone, they recruit them, they find the next person. I was like, this is a good like little adventure like journey.
Yeah,
you know, everyone's Australian.
Yeah,
it's always a good time.
Yeah. But yeah,
I was not able to let myself go the way y'all did. The whole time I was just like,
William, let me ask you a question. How sober were you when you watched this movie?
You know, I've been drugged through the garden a little bit. Had some jazz cigarettes.
I was
yeah.
I was very high, and I was like,
see, I almost think like because this is my second time watching it. When you kind of know, you're like, oh, none of this really matters. It's easier to vibe with it versus trying to be like, what's happening now? You know?
Yeah. I do think like, and I think this movie is great to watch in a group because you're like literally one of my notes. It's like, it says, oh, because Rog tells them at one point your journey has just begun. Like he literally says that line of dialogue in this movie. And then, and then I was like, why is Gerard Butler doing quips? And then the part where he fights the knight, it just says, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
So that's how my notes went. So like you don't want to find out what they're doing,
right?
Pay attention to plans. You just want to sit there and watch how insane.
You know, it's all magic nonsense. Yeah. So it's always going to come down to that.
And see, and I do think that it ends up like the fact that they're all Australian or English kind of helps you not take it seriously at all because of how ridiculous it looks. Them like saying like, there's a part where Gerard Butler is like looking at his warriors and he's like, "You guys are the best of Egypt, just like me." And I like laughed out loud at that line. Like anytime they talk about how they're from Egypt, it reminds you of how not from Egypt every character is in this movie.
I was
it made me laugh
at how bad it was. Like, because like Alex Proyas, like he's like kind of made some like weird movies in the past little while, but like The Crow and Dark City are so good, but like this movie just like it just looked so bad, and it was just all the decisions were just so insane, and like I was expecting to watch a Ridley Scott movie, so that didn't help at all. But I was honestly surprised to like how
that's gonna
how this got away from them so fastly. Like it looked like total shit,
and I
like, it was terrible.
I do wonder, like, you wonder who
Right.
the audience for this movie is, because like Egypt, like with Gladiator, I think most people know enough about ancient Rome and even like ancient Egypt. Like most people know the basics where you could pull a Gladiator style movie based in Egypt. But like for this one, like if you don't know that Ra's the sun god, it makes it even more confusing. Like if you don't know basics about Egypt, and like luckily as a kid, I would read like mummy stuff all the time. Also, kudos for these guys for not having any mummies, because someone pitched it at least once a day.
This should have been a video game or like a comic book.
It is
way better.
I will say,
this would have been a cool video game.
You're wondering why this got made, and I think it's because despite the Clash of the Titans remake that came out in 2010 not being great, that movie made like $500 million, and I think that was literally just like, let's just do that, you know.
And I will say, this movie does feel like a Clash of the Titans, Jason. No, that's even a better comparison, Jason and the Argonaut style, where like it's clearly trying to like tell a story about the ancient gods and stuff, but also like everyone talks like in modern times and is a robot for some reason. Like that's kind of what the energy that this movie's bringing. So if you view it in that way, and if Fun Times is legal in your state, I would recommend doing that. And then also not trying to hold on to any part of the story, other than to point out how none of the story.
Just watch it, but don't pay
sense.
attention to anything.
Just pay attention to their accents and what their visuals.
Yeah, enjoy the wacky ride
it's
you set out upon.
But like, and I wonder, this is like for the people who really like ancient Egypt and also like the general idea of Marvel Universe, but don't like comic books. That's the only person I could see this audience for. So it's essentially for me 30 years ago. When I was 2.
If you want to see what Jaime Lannister's stalled out movie career looks like,
don't listen to him, Jamie. We still hope that you.
He was like in a Hitman movie that was pretty good. One day. He like played a Hitman or something. I don't remember. You'll have to look it up.
He's been in a couple like.
Oh, he's a good actor. It's just there's only so much you could do in roles like this, you know.
It's just like if someone offered you Gods of Egypt, you'd have to rethink your entire career up until that.
Oh my god.
But I mean, this movie, we kind of wanted to cover something stupid and silly, just to have a little bit of fun. So check it out. I don't know. It's such a silly movie. And honestly, also, if you see that first 20-minute fight scene and you're not on board, just turn it off, because it's not going to get better than that. You're not going to get more on board. But well, thank you guys for joining us. This is the last week of the Indiegogo, so I guess next week you'll back to regular scheduled commercials. What if I just start putting them randomly in the middle? But anyway, check it out, like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week on the Bomb Squad of Egypt. Hey, over here. Yeah, go over here. It's director Andrew Hara, who made the empty space in the last ones. I'm supposed to be telling you about my new project, Fallout. There's just one little problem. As you can see, I'm in a little bit of a pickle. But don't worry, with your help, we can figure it all out. So come on, let's go. The reason he's chasing me is because he's obsessed with the subject of Fallout, Ali Axe,
She's a popular streamer. She's having this very special Halloween episode, but he's gonna make it truly frightening. As the killer makes his way into the house, it's gonna be a fight to the death between Allie and her stalker, and there can only be one survivor. Followed is going to be found footage film because we want you to be right there in the terror with Allie. We're inspired by such films as Scream, District 9, and the entire giallo genre because we really want those colors to pop, especially the blood. Okay, I think we lost. Come on, let's go. That was close. So if you haven't figured it out by now, Followed is going to be my first slasher film. But while we do want to give you a fun, cool slasher film, Followed wants to talk about a little bit more about parasocial relationships and about internet culture and about how the person on the other side of the screen might not be who you think they are. But to make this movie, we're going to need your help. Because this is a more ambitious project, I've started this Indiegogo so we can make Followed the best it can be. I'm assembling an amazing team to make this movie, including working with iShape Productions, who did the super cool Rorschach vs. V short film. Your donations will be going to the effects, paying the cast and the crew, and of course, all the blood. In addition to that, if you support the film, you can get a number of perks from your name in the credit, a poster, exclusive screenings, and much more. With your help, I know we can make Followed a unique and special type of slasher, unlike one anyone has ever seen. And the best part of it is, we'll be able to stop that killer once and for all. Yeah, it'll be cool. So donate today, before it's too late.